Sebastian Sylwan. I'm here part of the program board and advisory board of FMX. I'm currently doing a little bit of live action VR with a small studio in Montreal called Felix and Paul. There are definitely a lot of parts that are in movement, and to me, that's the part that is exciting, right? There's change in the air, and there's change in the air that has been coming for a number of years. If you've been paying any attention, is there's the convergence we've been talking about between film and games, etc., and using real-time technologies into areas that are not necessarily where they were based off, and using, of course, a lot of other more complex technologies from things that had a more less stringent time requirements in games. It's that convergence and convergence of techniques and methods and technologies has been coming for a while. Now, like the technology developments that all of our cell phones brought to us, cheaper, better, more dense displays enabled virtual reality, of course, and what all of the processes of virtual production, so the fact that we are digitizing and tracking a lot more throughout the pipeline in the production processes of all these things, and tracking those things in a much more unified way with somewhat standardized tools, it's kind of all coming together. It's a very exciting time. And they kind of fit into a spectrum in my mind, at least. All of the world building and virtual production helps shape the narrative in a slightly different way, and that kind of leaks into the virtual reality where the narrative is changed completely. You have to build a word to an extent and let go of some of the more traditional narrative tools like camera or control over time or control over the view of the spectator or anything that actually forces the audience to look in a specific direction, but the audience needs to be strongly acknowledged as part of the experience. And so it is incredibly exciting. Nobody, I think I mentioned in a panel earlier, nobody knows where this is going. If anybody says they do, they're lying. But it is still incredibly exciting because it's very exploratory. There's so much to understand and find out and research, and that's what gets me going. I've been involved in a number of things. More recently, it's been live action VR. So and the slant to it, there is of course a technology component to it, but the part that interests me the most is the creative element of what does cinematic VR means in terms of narrative. What are the stories that can be told in VR? What is content going to look like in a virtual reality environment? And what is what is the best way to tell a story or to give audiences a more exciting experience? And it interests me. Of course, I've been interested in narrative and what it means for a long time, and what are the best tools to actually enhance or help the creative process move along, and what shapes the actual creation takes. But on the other side, there's also a large number of unsolved technical challenges when you move to a non-flat screen. And there's not a day I don't have at least one instance of, how do we solve that one? And I really don't know. Let's try these 2 or 3 things and see which one sticks, right? And it feels a little bit like CG and visual effects felt when I started. So I guess I feel a little bit younger. VR is, to me, a new medium, right? And it needs to be treated with the respect that it deserves as a new medium. Meaning, in my opinion, even games in VR and film in VR are 2 different media. It's like saying that because we play games on a PlayStation on a television and we watch movies on the same television, that they're the same media. They're absolutely not. And there are languages to be developed and to be discovered in VR that are not yet there. And so I think that this is one of the reasons I love FMX. here this week was incredibly stimulating. We're having all of the discussions about what business models we could apply to the new frontier of VR. We are discussing the technical aspects of it, and I just came out of a discussion in which we were discussing fairly deeply what a model for a camera could do or should do. And at the same time, we're discussing content, the creative aspects of it, how that will make things change for artists. It's a fantastic environment and very eclectic in the amount of discussions. These type of discussions and the quality and the level of the people that you can have them with here is unmatched. There's no other conference, no other place on earth where you can do that. So it's incredibly fascinating. I come back for that every year. Part of the discussion is also what business models will be applied. And at the moment, there isn't a market. There isn't an audience for VR. There are no devices is just about to change, but there are no devices that you can buy and go and buy content from somewhere else. So a lot of it is actually a derivative market from the producers of the devices, and so they are financing a number of projects or productions in order to generate the content that will generate then the demand for the devices. So it's kind of trying to get out of the catch-22. The business models for the future of VR were discussed earlier. We were discussing it in a panel, and I think that there are two main elements there that I think are worth mentioning. One, this is again new. There's not necessarily, of course, existing players in the field will try to adapt maybe even old business models to the new medium, but there is no rule, and there is a lot of freedom because it's such an exploratory field to go into it and try new things and new business models and new ways of distribute content. It really is a different environment to when the traditional media distribution models were established. So that's one part. The other part is, I think that one of the biggest challenges and the things that we want to resolve is moving beyond what is now almost a derivative media. So although it's been treated in the content as a unique and self-standing media, you still have a lot of derivative content. We ourselves made some pieces that are companion pieces to traditional media pieces. So we just finished, and we were showing here a Jurassic World, which will be launched and released publicly in a few weeks, which is the most intimate experience you can ever have with a dinosaur, and that is of course a companion piece to Jurassic World. We have also produced original media, and that I think is the real bet of identifying what are the unique characteristics of the medium, playing to those strengths, and creating and ideating content that plays to those strengths and is native to that media. So making original content for VR, and then maybe creating spin-offs that go on to traditional media. So you make a VR experience from which you create characters, and then you go make a movie or a video game or whatever it is. In doing that, we have to be very careful that, like in the history of media, there has not really been replacements, but rather a focusing of the old media on what they do best, and the taking of a niche or another part by the incumbent media. And so I think that there are things that films do particularly well, character development and construction and creating an emotional connection in a darkened room with a sole focus. Video games are very good to raising your heartbeat. I think so virtual reality has that sense of presence and of intimacy that is absolutely unique. And so we need to play to the strengths of the various media, and that's the bet that we're really trying to place. VR is still a very exploratory medium, so it's hard to say where a breakthrough will come from. My opinion is that it will. The right bet to place is on original content that is specifically tailored to the media. In the meanwhile, however, tying onto either properties or stories or experiences that have an immediate point of contact with the audience, of course, short circuits some of that process, because you have something that audiences can immediately relate to and have an immediate connection with, and so there is a balance to be struck as we go about developing a language for VR, because there isn't one. It needs to be explored and developed, and discoveries need to be made, much in the same way in which the language of cinema, very well established today, had a grammar developed for it for over decades, right? And it's still evolving to a certain extent. If you watch a movie from the '60s, the pacing of it and the lighting and the cuts and how you would do a flashback or artifices for communication are incredibly different, and you can see styles in various directors, recognize them, and take them as either dialects, or when you can reference them and take them either dialects or variations over the grammar, and it's still a very lively medium. So I think that the key of the willingness of consumers to adopt new technologies is in the gratification they get from them. So if there is good content, because it's a medium for content, right? So if there is good content, I think that, and content of whichever kind, I think that there will be much more willingness of audiences to actually embrace the medium. If the content is so-and-so, it can cause some discomfort, or if it's really not thought for the medium, is just a transposition of media from of content from other media. I think that there is a serious risk that people will just get past the novelty factor and just abandon it. VR is such an early in early infancy that there is a huge amount of opportunity. So my best advice is follow whatever interests you, and you can buy a device, you can buy a camera for $300 that will take panoramic, not stereoscopic, but a panoramic picture, and you can very easily concoct a rig that I think you might even be able to buy one in the very near future, a rig that allows you to shoot a panoramic stereo experience or cinematic experience. And so the opportunity is huge. It's just, if you have ideas, the language is all to be defined. So nobody can say what is wrong or what is right. It's just a matter of experimenting, which is the thing that personally excites me the most, but it's also the biggest opportunity for anybody. There's no written rule, so anybody's idea is just as good as your neighbor's. So that's a huge opportunity. I think that we are still in the process of making virtual production widespread, and most importantly, I think one of the main goals of virtual production is to actually make not just the individual task inside a production more efficient, but also the collection of the tasks and the ability to communicate across various departments and various activities more efficient. And so I think that is to an extent still ongoing. We're seeing more and more experiments with real-time technologies that somewhat we pioneered. It's not something that has been spoken much of publicly, but we did mention when I was still at Weta Digital a few of these technologies. There is a lot more of the immediate feedback and shortening the revision cycles and helping the communication and tracking and maintaining metadata and the core of the creative decisions across the pipeline. So I think that we're still in that. Some of the exciting things is when some of these techniques or ideas or methods get commoditized, and I think that they're starting to be there. There are a number of game engines that are going in that direction. It's slightly, of course, at a completely different scale and with slightly different objectives than the pipelines that we had built at Weta Digital, but the intent is the same, and it's going to be exciting to see what young creative people or even old creative people can do with them. I think that it also goes into the same direction of VR. You're effectively creatively constructing a world, and the fact that you have less of the traditional storytelling tools. It still is a world where you enable stories to happen. And actually, although you do relinquish some of the control you had on a film set, on a traditional cinematic film set, you also have a lot more at your disposal. So it's not just limitations, it also opens, the creating content in VR also has other doors for obtaining similar results. I think the main point of relevance for FMX is that they bring together the best work of the year and very high level creative, business, technical people and the best players in the respective fields. They bring them all together to present. And being a smaller venue, it allows not only for those people to present, but also to absorb the presentations that normally in a place like NAB or SIGGRAPH or IBC would be much more difficult to actually dedicate the time. There is also the hub, the speakers lounge, where everybody spends time and meets. I've had more interesting conversations in that space and useful context and networking in there than probably in any other room on the planet. And so I think that's what makes FMX special and what makes it incredibly relevant.